On this episode of the Elite Realty Group Podcast, we are going to take a deep dive into exactly what has happened, what is happening, and potentially maybe some projections on what may happen as we head into the final quarter of 2025 in the Lakeway Area real estate market. This is going to be a ton of great information for you. Thank you for watching, listening, tuning in today. Let's go get this information. Here we go, y'all. Hello once again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Elite Realty Group Podcast, where we bring you the most up-to-date, relevant real estate information you're going to find anywhere on the planet. You're going to get it right here from your friends at Elite Realty Group. Welcome to this action-packed, information-filled podcast where we're going to take this deep dive into the real estate market. It's hard to believe as we sit here recording this episode on the 1st of October that we are literally heading into the final quarter of 2025. This year has flew by. It's almost over. We don't have long left at all. And you think about the real estate market and what's happened, what is happening now. There has been a lot of opinions. There's been a lot of information. Some right, some wrong, some I think just people pulling out of thin air to create whatever narrative they're trying to create. But we want to look into that today. We want to look, because I always believe that data tells us an information, or data gives us information. It tells us a story. I think a lot of times you can look at data and again, see some things that's happening, maybe prove what's right and disprove what is wrong. So we're literally today just pulled up fresh in front of me is the information for what has happened so far this year in the Lakeway area, in the real estate market here. And I think it's going to bring up some very good discussion points that we can put some information out there. I would love to hear your take on the information as we present it to you and how and what you interpret it as, and maybe what you're seeing. Again, you could be out there having a home on the market. You could be looking for a property. We have a lot of buyers and sellers I know watch this podcast, listen to it. We encourage you. I encourage you. Jump in the conversation. Let's talk about this today, because the real estate market in 2025 has been what I have kind of alluded to and called throughout the year. We've been talking about a lot on this podcast. We are kind of transitioning to, it's been a transitional market. We are transitioning to more of what you would call a normal real estate market. What does it look like when you have normal? We have came out of, you go back to COVID and all that presented to us and what the changes that it made in the real estate market. There were a ton of changes that happened, particularly when you talk about pricing and how home prices rose and what that meant and what that looked like, especially here in our area. We had a meeting yesterday with one of our lender partners, and they were talking about just the craziness of what did go on, what did happen as far as the real estate market goes in our area. And honestly, it was chaos. The activity that happened during that time really caused home prices, not just here, but all throughout the country, really caused those to rise and rise rapidly. And it was one of those things that I don't think anybody saw it at the time, but it was not a sustainable place. Like prices rising that much, it was not sustainable at all, which kind of led to the last couple years of prices still rising because inventory was still low. And with low inventory, again, you don't have a lot to pick from out there. Prices continued to rise despite interest rates rising and all those things, which we will get into today. But I think where we are right now, we've got enough data in 2025. Again, we got 3/4 of the year behind us. We can really start looking and seeing and formulating some things of what does this look like to move forward? What does the real estate market look like when we move forward? That's where we are going to dive into today and get this information that is literally out there for you to do. The first thing that I want to talk to you about is a statistic that we track here at the office. And we track this for two different reasons. We track it for people that home buyers getting ready to put an offer in on a property. We track it for them so they can kind of see this is what's happening in the market right now. And we also track it for our sellers to kind of help us in pricing. Everybody wants to make sure they get as much as they can out of their property. However, you don't want to jump the curb. You don't want to do too much. You don't want to go too high, because you'll see here in a minute, those homes that are going too high, they're just sitting on the market. They're just staying there. They're sitting. So this first statistic that we look at, again, good for both sides, is what we have tabbed as, and it is in our multiple listing service, as the sold to list ratio, meaning what the home's priced at versus what ultimately it sells at. Okay, what's the drop? Is there a drop? Is home selling for over asking price? Are home sellers actually dropping? That's why we look at that. So when you look at the Lakeway area, and this has been, okay, when I look at this has been within 1.5% literally for the last year. So this has been a very steady place that home sellers and home buyers have been when it comes to that sold to list ratio. So currently right now at the end of September, we are at a sale to list ratio of 96.7%. What that means is homes are ultimately selling for 96.7% of what the home is listed for. Okay, so they're dropping about 3.3%. If you would put that in our terms, what's that mean to me? Homes are dropping at about 3.3% of what they were initially listed for. Okay, that could mean a whole lot of things. Okay, let's dive into it and talk about it. One of the things that we see, a very common offer, a very common thing that a seller does in this marketplace that we're in today, is one of the things that interest rates and just cost of getting a home have bought into this, have played into this. But we see a very common offer in our area today is assuming the home is priced correctly. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Assuming the home is priced correctly in the beginning, we're seeing that a lot of home buyers will offer the seller the listing price or the asking price for the property, but they are offering some sort of concessions from that seller, meaning they're wanting their closing costs paid. They're wanting, again, loan origination fees and all that goes into those buyer expenses for the buyer to get the loan for this property. They're asking the seller to actually contribute to that. Typically, it's 3 to 5%. When you look at homes that are selling sold to list ratios, 96.7%, you kind of see that built into that. Now, if you're out there and you're a home buyer and you're like, well, I don't need the seller to contribute to any concessions. I don't need any of that. I've got money saved up. I've got this stuff out there. Well, a good standard offer is going to be, and you see again, homes that are priced correctly, prices are dropping about 3.3% from the asking price. We use this information a lot because you have a lot of buyers that are out there and, they want to go 25, 30% and sometimes more than that on their initial offer to these sellers. And that's just not what's happening in the market. They're hearing the stories of, well, I'm hearing homes are sitting on the market longer and sellers are getting desperate and all of these kind of things are happening. So I'm going to go in and lowball them. A lot of times, again, we never tell you what to make as that offer as a real estate agent. We just show you this data. And the data is telling us that's not what's happening in this real estate market. Home sellers are not cutting the bottom out of their homes to get them sold on average. And this average, again, has been within 1.5% for the entire last year. On average, they're dropping the prices about 3.3% from the initial asking price. So you need to formulate that. You need to think about that when you're making an offer. You need to think about that when you're pricing your property, because we get asked from sellers a lot of times, like, I know they're probably going to expect me to drop. I know they may want concessions. I know all of that's there. So I want to build that in. Well, building that in looks like in real time 3.3%. You want to build that in. Now, You can't jump the curb. I continue to say you have to price it correctly from the beginning. That's the key point, and a lot of people are missing that point right now. But I think, and you're going to see this here in just a minute, I think sellers are starting to see that picture. We've got to do this right from the beginning. This is one of the things that I think you need to hear today, okay? We did a report internally in the office, and we looked at this information. It's been about a month and a half ago, and it's probably something we need to revisit here very soon. But we looked at properties that sold. We took a month's worth of data. We looked at properties that had sold within the last month. Okay, we looked at 1 month here. And here's what the data told us in that month. Homes that were listed on the market in that month that sold, okay, this was sold properties only. Homes that sold within that month, they were on the market on average of 28 days. Okay. They had been on the market for an average of 28 days. They had zero price reductions. Okay. That represented 65% of what sold that month. That means 65% of the people, their home was on the market for an average of 28 days. They did not reduce the price and they sold the property. The remaining 35% that sold in that month, okay, they had been on the market on average of 212 days. Now, you see the difference in that, okay? But hear this. Those homes, 35% of those homes had price reductions. On average, they reduced the price $30,000, and it took them 212 days. Those were people who were being unrealistic in the beginning. And they were saying, oh, we can always come down. We can't go up. That old line that we hear a lot. But what that did, that caused their home to sit on average of 212 days, and they had to, on average, reduce $30,000. On the other hand, the people that did it right from the beginning, 23 days, no price reductions, that represented 65% of what sold. So when I tell you getting it right from the beginning, and this sold to list ratio shows us that, you've got to be within about 3 to 5% of what that market analysis comes back for. In other words, what the sold market says, if you're going much more than 5% of that, you're probably going too high because the market tells us 3.3%. So home sellers, take that into consideration when pricing your property. Remember, you want to get it sold fast, for top dollar, least amount of hassle that it can be to you. That means you're going to have to do it right in the beginning. If not, your home's going to sit. You're going to continue to reduce, and hopefully within a period of time, you will get a contract on that property. But keep in mind, that report I just told you, only 35% of the market was represented in that. That's not good. You don't want to be in the 35%. You want to jump over in the 65% and get your home sold. So that sold to list ratio, that tells us some of those stories. If you're a buyer making offers on a property, on average, that's what a home seller is dropping. If you're a home seller and you're pricing your property, that's probably the amount and not more than that you need to build into for negotiations potentially with a buyer. Again, weigh in on this. Let me hear what you think about it. Let me hear what your thoughts were. Again, we talk to a lot of people, and a lot of people think because homes have been sitting on the market for a little bit longer, and that's where we're going next, so hang on. They think that they can come in and go 20 and 30 and 40 and more percentage lower than the asking price. And I'm not telling you that you can't, okay? Because there are some home sellers who they think they can price at 20 and 30 and 40% too high. It's just not what you're typically seeing, because this is homes that have actually sold. 3.3% is what you're seeing on the drop. So let's look over into these days on the market, because this is a real story. It's actually a good story, I think, for the entire real estate market. It's a good story for both buyers and sellers that you're seeing happening. And this information that I'm going to give you, it tells the story that home sellers are starting to be a whole lot more realistic with how they are pricing these properties, okay? When we go back and we look at average days on the market, okay, for the Lakeway area, okay, our high for the year, okay, the high for the year came in at 76.8 days, and we reached that high in January. That was our high. So that just meant homes that were selling, they were average selling in 76.8 days. That's the high of the year. We have watched that from January drop down, and in June represented the lowest of the entire year thus far. In June, so we went from 76.8 in January. In June, which is our low to date, was 46.7%. So 46.7 days. So dropped about 30 days through the course of the year through June. We saw a jump back up to 68 days in July. And since July, again, we've saw a steady decline, with our most recent data being close to that low that we arrived at in June, which was 46.7 days. Our number for September is 53.1 days. That means on average, if you're out there, you're a home seller, it's taking on average about 53.1 days to get what you want, those current days on the market, get that house sold. I'm going to go back and continue to say this is pricing it right, okay? You see this come from 76.8 days. We're now sitting at 53 days pretty much. That tells me home sellers are starting to get the point, get the picture that, hey, we can't overprice this house. People are understanding. That's what a lot of people are doing. They were just overpricing properties. And so if you're doing it right, you're going to look at about 53 days of getting what you want. That's contract on that house. Pricing right now, honestly, is the most critical thing that you can do for your property to get it sold. As far as buyers, the number one thing you want to look at to make sure what you're buying is the right thing. You're making a good offer. You're doing the right thing. But that 53 days is the number that we're at. And again, we're on another downward trajectory that hopefully we may even see that lower more. That just means, again, home sellers are starting to see, hey, I can't overprice. This isn't 2 years ago. I'll just be honest with you. When you look at January being 76 days, this isn't 9-10 months ago. This is what it is now. People that are adjusting those homes are selling quickly in the average of 53 days. So make sure you're out there. You're considering putting your house on the market. The most critical time is when it first goes on the market. It's hot. That's when it shows up new. That's when everybody sees it. That's when open houses go on. And all of those things happen. Get it right out of the gate, okay? If you get it right out of the gate, you're looking at about 53 days is what you're seeing in the marketplace to make sure that you sell that house. Now, two more things, and I'll be done with you for the day that I want to talk to you about. The next one is absorption rate. You say, what's an absorption rate? It's literally how much we have on the market as far as inventory goes. Meaning if we did not list another home, we would have this many or this amount of time on the market before we totally sold everything that we had. Okay. Let's make a comparison between 2024 and 2025, because you hear all the time, oh, there's more homes on the market now than there's ever been. And that is true. Okay. That is true. But it's not still yet what a lot of people think that it is. So in 2024, again, at this point in time in 2024, we had 3.5 months of inventory. Again, meaning if we did not list another property and we sold everything that we had, 3.5 months, we would be totally out of houses to sell. Where we sit right here in 2025, we're currently sitting at 4.7 months. Now, this is the Lakeway area, okay? Morristown, Tennessee area. We're currently sitting at 44.7 months of inventory. So we've got, again, about 34% more inventory right now this year than we do last year. A lot of people think we've got months and months and months, and it's totally turned over to a buyer's market. You typically see it move into a buyer's market when that number goes over 6 months. So we are in what's considered a soft seller's market. It's more normal than it is anything. We're really not in either side market. We're in kind of a normal market at the 4.7 months, meaning sellers ain't charging an arm and a leg for the property and getting it. And buyers ain't cutting the bottom out of it. Again, 3.3% is what you're seeing in that drop. That's pretty normal, okay? So again, it's not that we've got so much inventory that we're back at that crash phase that everybody seems to think we've been at. We have not been there all year. And inventory may tick up, but with days on the market going down, I don't know that I necessarily see that either, okay? Let's look at one more point of data that I want to show you, and it's literally where our marketplace sits at right now. When you look at the average sales price of homes sold, okay, the average sales price of homes sold in the Lakeway area, it's $304,000. That is it's $350,000. That's the median. The average is $350,000. That's up $2,000 from last year. So when you talk about prices rising, this is what we look at. They've rose 0.6%, okay? So not even a percent has home prices rose in the Lakeway area. So that again tells us home prices are rising at 0.6%, but it's not like sellers are just getting anything that they want. Home sellers need to hear that. Home buyers need to know that. That's where our marketplace sits at right now, is 0.6% of a gain in home prices, the average sale price from 2025 to 2024. So they're not going up nowhere near like they was. This number a couple years ago, y'all, 3-4 years ago probably now, that number was over 45%. So you can see the growth of home prices have slowed down, which honestly is what the real estate market needed. It was not sustainable. I said that earlier. Home prices rising 40+% a year is not sustainable. What we see now is we're kind of chilling out here. Okay, 0.6% is where we are. This has been a deep dive, just taking a little deep dive into the real estate market so you can kind of see what's happening. Now, what does that mean going forward? Well, we're seeing home price or days on the market come down. That tells us that sellers are being more realistic with their initial listing price. So everybody's starting to adapt and starting to adjust. We're seeing the sold to list ratio literally be at that 3.3% drop. That's all good news for all parties involved. Here's the magic question that we get. What do you see with interest rates going forward? That's a loaded question, okay? That's a loaded question. We had the conversation yesterday again with one of our lender friends. Everybody's watching the feds, like what's the feds going to do? And if they cut the interest rate out the bottom, mortgage rates are going to drop. And one of the things you need to know, without going into too much more data and details with you, the Fed rate drop does not directly impact mortgage rates. There's a lot more things that go into that, and that's for another day. However, it will eventually affect mortgage rates. But there will be, in my opinion, a couple more, potentially 2 more rate cuts this year. And sometimes that makes the interest rate go up before it makes it go down. So I think we're going to jump around where we are right now for the next little bit. I think you're going to see up some, down some. I think it's going to jump all over. I think what we're going to really be watching for is potentially the spring market of 2026 being a potential really moving point of those interest rates. Now, here's what you need to hear today, and this is what we'll say on the way out the door. When mortgage rates do come down, and I'm going to call it mid to low 5s, potentially the high 4s. I'm not going to say that that's where it's going to go, but I do think we'll get into the 5s, low 5s, mid 5s coming up in the new year. That's when you're going to see a whole lot more buyers jump into the real estate market, okay? What typically happens when a lot of buyers come in, home prices rise, okay? Right now, there are a lot of people sitting on the sidelines waiting to see what happens, okay? It's caused home prices to only rise at 0.6%. If we get a flood of a lot of buyers jumping into the market, it is nothing more than a supply and demand game. We do have more supply now. We just looked at it earlier. It's 4.7 months versus 3.5. So the supply's there. When the demand meets up with the supply, that 0.6% of a jump is probably going to rise. It's probably going to rise to 5 to 8%, somewhere through there. That's my projection. When it happens, that means, again, if we go back to this $350,000 house, that's the average house right now, that house is going to be on average of $17,500 more when that moment happens. So there's a lot of things you got to weigh out, okay? There's a lot of things you're going to weigh out. I'll leave it, and I'll go and leave the door with this. When's the right time to buy and sell a house? That's not for me. That's not for any other guru. That's not for anyone to sit here and tell you. The right time to buy and sell a house for you is when it is the right time to buy and sell a house for you. If financially it's the right time, then it's the right time. Okay? Don't let numbers, don't let this could happen, don't let that could happen, influence, impact what you do, because when it's right for you, it's right. When it's wrong for you, it's wrong. This has been the most up-to-date relevant real estate information on the Elite Realty Group Podcast, presented by your friends at Elite Realty Group, just for you. Hopefully this has been some good information for you. Continue to watch our channels, whatever channel you're watching on, listening on, for more daily content. We try to keep you guys up to date on what's going on in the real estate market, and specifically to the Lakeway area here in the East Tennessee region. I really appreciate you all tuning in today. I hope this has been good information for you, and I hope to see you on one of our upcoming episodes. Let me know in the comment section, what do you think about this information? Until I see you guys next time, be safe, be blessed, over and out.